Hello and welcome to Nick V Uncensored. Today we've got Dr. Diane Kazer and Nick Andrews, and today we're going to be talking about bioregulators, how they can reverse hair loss using or repairing or healing the immune system instead of finding mainstream solutions. It looks like this is where the future is headed to. Now, just before we begin, we're back on YouTube, and I want to just say a disclaimer that we're not financial advisors or health advisors, to do your own research. Everything is entertainment and for educational purposes only. We're here to speculate and just speak openly with opinions and explore this space. Again, please do your research. Dr. Diane Kazer, thank you so much for joining me, and Nick Andrews. How are you, and what have you been up to? We'll go with Dr. Diane first.
Well, I'm excited. My parents are coming to visit Mexico for the first time. And after the show, I'm going to go pick them up at the Cancun airport, and I'm taking them to Chichen Itza. Nick, you might know this, that Thursday is a very big day for our spiritual awakening and a huge activation from what we've been told. So it's going to be an interesting week.
Very interesting. When you say Nick, do you mean me or Nick Andrews?
After this show today, I'm going to go pick up my parents. And so, yeah, there's two Nicks here. So that's true. We're going to have to be very discerning about which Nick. I'll say Nick V today.
Yeah, Nick V or Nicholas, whatever. But that's great stuff. I'm glad to hear it. And Nick Andrews, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to be with yourself, Nick, and Dr. Diane again. I'm a nerd at heart, so I'm always working on a new project, finding something new and interesting to build that, hopefully gets out to a lot of people. So, and it's great to get to talk about it with people like you and Dr. Diane.
Absolutely. Before we started the show, one of you said that after 2020, a lot of people experienced a lot of hair loss. Sure. Can you go into that a little bit for me and explain to me why you think that is? And why specifically after 2020?
Yeah. Okay. So I actually have a few slides because I think it's so important. Myself, I've been a doctor for close to 17 years now, a doctor of traditional naturopathy. I'm board certified. I've got 11 certifications in various different degrees of health, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, and looking at the human body and why, the root cause of why we're experiencing hair loss and why we're experiencing weight gain. And so many people, it's become an epidemic, immunodeficiency, cognitive deficiency. And when we don't have a brain, we don't have anything. You're not going to make hair. And minoxidil is not the answer. The answer is asking the question, why is my body all of a sudden losing hair? And I've got a few slides to actually show you real labs that we see on a regular basis. And I'm not talking about like the standard CBC, the standard blood testing that you go to your MD and insurance covers. I'm talking about what you deserve, which is functional medicine, regenerative medicine, environmental medicine. Everything around you becomes you. And so when we're looking at urinary analysis, which is, I've been looking at urinary analysis, hormone analysis, and I'm talking not just blood for hormones, I'm talking about urinary analysis to look at what the body's actually using of the hormones that we produce. Because the more toxins, the more pathogens, the more parasites, the more any of these things that are around us in our environment that we're unaware of, those will actually block your own minerals from getting in, which minerals make hair. Minerals are the spark plugs also that make your hormones. And so the answer isn't just more hormones. The answer is asking the question, why am I deficient in the first place? And COVID brought us a whole onslaught of stressors, chemical stressors, mental, emotional stressors, financial stressors, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, and a lot of division between each other. We also need oxytocin, which is a love hormone, a love molecule, and this is also a peptide, oxytocin. And when we don't have that, we don't have connection to ourselves or our parts or anybody. So all of these toxins and the parasites, the poisons, it's literally breaking down our tissues, our connected tissues, our glands. And when our body can't communicate with its parts, it's like not being able to text somebody who's sitting right next to you because you don't have cell signal. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about the cells today and how we can reactivate your cells so that your body can do what it's known how to do, but it has been deactivated because of all the stressors.
Do you think that it's a combination of things like processed foods and the things they put in the air, in the skies, the white lines that we see in the skies, that is very bad for us, I mean, it doesn't just go into our noses and our mouths, but also probably in our hair, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
would you say this has an impact on health?
You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. Go ahead, Nick.
yeah, I mean, one way I like to describe it is kind of think of the power grid of a city. You can have a few power lines go down here and there, and for the most part, everybody still has power. Maybe one or two neighborhoods are out, and if those lines never get fixed, at some point, enough of those small lines go down that suddenly one small line goes down that you didn't think was important, and half the city loses power. So, from a health exposure lifestyle perspective, that's exactly what happens to human health is, we can be around glyphosate, pesticides, endocrine disruptors, whatever's being sprayed in the sky all day long. And all of these are essentially causing damage to, smaller power lines in the power grid. And over time, that builds up to critical mass. And one of the hard aspects to kind of wrap your head around until you zoom out is you see some people do fine, and then you see some people really struggle very early on. And that just comes down to, what I term as the N of one effect. Everybody's biology is a little bit different. So everybody's critical weak points, they may be similar, but they're going to be a little bit different depending on your personal biology, your lifestyle, your diet, all of those factors, which that I think is where a lot of the confusion comes in because you see a wide array of how people are impacted. How do I tie them together? Well, it comes back to what is everybody's individual weak point based on how all those pieces come together.
And understood. Okay, so how do you see the future of hair loss? Because right now, the one of the biggest and most popular thing is hair transplants, and I have to say I'm guilty of that too. 4 or 5 years ago, I went and redone my hairline. I don't want to lose my hair. So what would you say the future is for that? I've heard of follicle cloning or things like that. What do you think?
So, yeah, Dr. Diane already touched on this. There are multiple types of tests. Just my two personal favorite, one is called an organic acid test and one is called a Dutch test. One measures urine metabolites for hormones and other factors. Other measures metabolic byproduct factors. And the fascinating thing with those two tests or tests like them is that when you put those together, they give you a very complete map of everything going on your body, whereas the standard blood panels, they can be important by all means, but they're only showing you one very tiny piece of the puzzle. And these other tests show you essentially map the majority of the biology going on in your body. So once you have that map, you can actually see where things are going wrong. So to put that into perspective, if you want to go spend, all your personal time and mental horsepower, there's actually a ton of published literature on hair loss that actually you can break it down into six main categories. So mitochondrial dysfunction, systemic inflammation, endocrine disruption, immune disruption, your microbiome, your gut health, and your circadian rhythm. And coming back to the earlier point, how all these pieces can come together differently for different people, the same thing happens with hair loss. So whatever your weak link is, once that weak link breaks, that's when you're going to start getting hair loss. And the traditional approach of maybe let's do a basic hormone test or a basic blood test, you're not going to see really any, if maybe just a small piece of any of those. So when you can see that full map, like here are the six core pieces of the puzzle that go wrong before hair loss happens, when you look at it appropriately and can see it, you can address it before it gets to a severe state. And if you can get to it before it's like a catastrophic state, the reality is a lot of people can regrow their hair. It's never going to be a fast process overnight. It just takes time, but you can halt it and you can reverse it.
So what if those men who have been bald for at least 25 years now and their head is shiny to the point where they've just completely lost the follicles, the stem, everything, can it still grow, or is that completely dead? Or are you talking about men who are going through the male pattern baldness process?
So if you break it down, there are really 4 or 5 subtypes of hair loss. The one you're referring to is what people just broadly often refer to as like genetic hair loss. It's just genetic, it's in the family. That is partially true, because in men, you have a subset of men who essentially have strongly upregulated androgen receptors. Their androgen receptors are super sensitive. So for those people, once they get to the point of, pardon the colloquialism, but the cue ball look, Mr. Clean, you're probably not going to be able to regrow all of it. That, at that point, you probably are looking at hair transplant if you want to go that route. But that said, if you ended up like that and you're going to go the hair transplant route, if you don't go address those 6 underlying nodes, your long-term success with that is a serious question. And that's a big investment, time, money, emotionally, to not also address that if you're going to go that route.
Okay, cool. You mentioned that there are a few things to look out for. I think you mentioned like 4 things, that to look out for once you've mapped, what things you need to address in the body. Could you tell us what type of things those are?
Yeah, so actually a big contributing factor, which is a big topic of conversation now, is actually microbiome health. Because one of the drivers you see in the majority of types of hair loss is loss of immune privilege. So what that means is that your hair follicles, they're hanging out, they're doing the thing, you're growing beautiful hair. They normally essentially have a special type of signaling telling the immune system not to mess with them. Leave me alone, let me do my thing. Now, whether it's due to oxidative stress, illness, other factors, if they start to lose that immune privilege, or on the other side, if your immune system starts to become hyperactive in the sense of autoimmune conditions, it will fail to recognize that leave me alone sign and start to attack the hair follicles. Now, where the microbiome comes in is the bacterial colonies that naturally live in the gut. They actually are the primary control factor for your immune system, for how it responds to everything. So when you hear how so many people today are struggling with gut dysbiosis, whether it's IBS or it doesn't even have to be that extreme. You have people who have gut dysbiosis and kind of seem normal, but are like, yeah, my gut's just off sometimes, right? So it can be a full spectrum. But as soon as your microbiota is off, you are almost guaranteed to be entering some degree of systemic immune inflammation. And then it's just a question of how it cascades.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Nick. Diane, Dr. Diane, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I actually want to show you guys the proof of this and what they look like on labs, because I've always dreamed up that the work that I do that inspires you to actually feel like I need to do something about this is to show the proof on labs. There are so many people who come to us and they say that, oh, I've had everything tested. I've done my blood tests. I've had my thyroid checked and everything was fine. I mean, who's listening to this and has heard from their doctor, oh, your labs look normal. But then you're like, but I don't, look at me. My hair is thinning. I've got acne. My hormones are off. I can't sleep well. I don't have a sex drive. Maybe you're trying to get pregnant. You can't lose weight. And you're like, I don't look well, but you're telling me that my blood tests are in range. So what Nick is saying, and what I'm saying, is that when we start to look deeper into the soil, which is your gut, of your whole body. That's really what governs everything is the soil of your gut. That's like they say it's your second brain. Some say it's your first brain, but your gut and your brain have a communication central system. And if your gut's off, then everything is off. And so I wanted to show a couple things, just a few slides here where I'm actually showing pictures of what hormone dysfunction and chaos looks like, as well as the things that people don't get tested for by their doctor, which is toxins and pathogens. And someone might say, oh, I did a stool test. My doctor did a stool test. There was no parasites. There's no candida. There was nothing. I was fine. But parasites are not they're very smart. They're not going to show up on a stool test that well. And so we treat people for also the symptoms that they have too. We don't just look at the blood tests or the stool test and say, okay, everything's fine. So I want to share a few things just so that you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about as it pertains to the types of labs that we do, so that you can understand. Nick was mentioning the test that we run, which is a Dutch test. And a Dutch test is a urine test. It's so much more intelligent with not just what is my body producing, but what is it using and what is it clearing? Because your gut clears a lot of these xenoestrogens or hormones that got used or didn't get used. And a lot of those xenoestrogens, they're estrogen mimickers, they're poisons. It's like the plastics, all the P's, the plastics, the parabens, like you said earlier, Nick V, the processed foods, which are just laced with glyphosate and atrazine, lots of other insecticides, and hormones. Cows are pumped full of hormones and antibiotics. And then we think, oh, I don't take any medications, but we're eating animals that have been just slaughtered with medications. And so this is what it looks like. So this is one example this was me several years ago, 8 years ago. On my blood tests, my testosterone was fine. On my urine test, look how low my testosterone was. So my doctor said, your testosterone's fine. And I said, it's not. And so at that point, I was looking at doing some HRT. I had breast implants at that time. And I had estrogen deficiency, as you can see here. And then I had progesterone deficiency. I was also not making very much cortisol, which means cortisol is your hormone that gives you energy. It's not just a hormone that you make when you're stressed out. It's a hormone that you make to give you energy, to also help you with something called eustress or making hair. Because Nick, I think, has mentioned already that your hair is very metabolically expensive. It takes a lot of energy to make it. And so when your body's tired and you're not making cortisol from your adrenals, you're not going to have healthy hair either. So this is beyond just the blood testing model. And this is where we're talking so much about, don't just stop at a blood test. And the other things is that we do see, and this happened with me, this happens with several patients, the doctor will test just TSH, T4, and T3, but there are 10 things that we look at as it pertains to thyroid health. And we have 25% of the population at this point has some degree of thyroid dysfunction, and increasing from all the toxins and the pathogens that we're talking about today. And we often see that people have not been properly tested for antibodies. Typically, antibodies to your thyroid is the reason why you have hypothyroidism to begin with, right? But that's the root cause. And you get autoimmune disease from poisons and pathogens in our environment, and gut dysfunction, which the more toxins, the more bugs you're going to have. So we have to get rid of all of it. And so what I even found is doctors were looking at just my thyroid 3 numbers, but no one looked at my antibodies. And I had a Hashimoto's diagnosis. I self-diagnosed because I see this on patients. I can't diagnose them. I can just say, you have a pattern of autoimmune dysfunction. Your antibodies are high. And if you have this, there is no hair growth, there is no fat loss, there is no healthy mood, there is no healthy sleep, and there's no energy. And so looking at all of these things, this is one other one I wanted to show. This is stool testing. We often see parasites don't show up, but when they do, it means that we really need to address them. We see fungal overgrowth. If there's fungal overgrowth in the body or mold, your hair is going to not only not grow back, but it's going to fall out, and you're going to see it come out in clumps. And, hair is not just about beauty. It's a telling point to the internal health of our body. And it means that your hormones are struggling. And so we can fix it all at one time. That's the point too, is we're not going after hormones and then your thyroid and doing like 30 different supplements for every different thing. When we treat the root of this, then everything starts to grow back just like a garden would. And then we look at the function of your immune system. That marker down there, the secretory IgA that I circled, it's rare that I see patients properly tested for comprehensive gut health, including these markers. The standard MD will look for a little bit of infection, but they're not looking at the health of the immune system. And here, This result was 181. That was the marker we tested for stool testing. We like to see it robust at around 1200 to 1500. That means your immune system is strong. And right now, with so many people with cancer, autoimmune disease, dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all of this is immune system dysfunction and lack of healthy hormone production and usage and clearance through the gut. So it's a whole body system. So I wanted to show you guys this proof so you could see firsthand what true functional diagnostic and functional medicine lab testing looks at, as Nick was talking about, to look for the root cause. And when we restore that, versus just looking at getting, on some Rogaine or some minoxidil or taking HRT or thyroid, Synthroid, there's a lot deeper issues that your body's screaming to be paid attention to. And this is what we want to help resolve today with what we're talking about in this conversation.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, please, Nick. Sorry.
There's another really good illustration of that. I've worked with quite a few women struggling through perimenopause. And a really common combination is perimenopausal onset depression and hair loss. And if you actually dig into it from a systems perspective, like Dr. Diane is talking about, the vast majority of the time, their issue isn't hair loss, their issue isn't depression. When you dig into it, it's usually a combination of hormonal deficiency, mitochondrial dysfunction, and microbiota disruption. And if you address those three, the vast majority of people is day and night. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to sit here and say that's going to cure you. But the reality in the real world is that if you look and you do see those and identify those, addressing those, the vast majority of people will see the majority of their issues resolve on their own.
Thank you very much, Nick, for sharing that with us. Dr. Diane, do you want to share your screen and show us exactly, the bioregulators that we want to share with the viewers today, and also how to use them and how to consume them?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to also call attention to, you guys might be wondering, who is Nick Andrews and why are we talking about this and what qualifies him to talk about everything? He's super nerdy, super intelligent, and he's very grounded in the work that he does. And I saw him in a podcast and I was so impressed because I'm a nerd too. And the way that he described all of this really spoke to me because I thought people need to know this. Like everybody needs to know this because you can take all the supplements in the world and they're not going to do anything when you're not turning your organ function back on again. So we don't need to make it so complex. Nick has a background in all of this, and where he came from, I think, is important to understand. And then we'll get into exactly what bioregulators are. And one thing I think, Nick, that your audience, Nick B, that your audience would find very, very, very helpful, because there's a lot of conversations and questions around and consciousness around, do the things that I'm taking have anything that are poisonous? Do they have things inside of them that could harm me, that could look like more COVID symptoms or could drain my immune system? And the bioregulators that he has are so purely sourced that he has done everything, he and his team has done everything to source from animals that are really well taken care of, and not the ones that are like in the CAFUs, the ones that are fed dust and plastic and lots of hormones and antibiotics. These are cows that when you look at the old school cows, they're grazing from grass and they get sunshine and they're happy. That's what we're sourcing from. So it's free from the contaminants that so many people are afraid of. And I can't say more than that because we're on YouTube, but I just want you guys to know that that was one of the main reasons that Nick spoke to me, because there is probably less than 2% of companies that are even out there that are focused on not poisoning you while giving you the shortcut. This is the root cause healing shortcut. If people want the shortcuts, this is it. If you do nothing else with your labs, and you just start trying bioregulators, your body is going to start to come back on board again, and your brain will start to work so that other things start to make sense, like the toxins and getting them out of your environment. So some people need that bridge to really understand how they can take back their health by treating their environment. But the bridge is the bioregulator, so that your body starts to turn back on again, and you care and you have the energy to start making changes in your life. So Nick, I want you to talk a little bit about where you came from too, because his history is where he came from, the world where they don't treat the root cause.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Diane. Biochemical engineer by education, worked in pharma and biotech for about 20 years. running manufacturing, all the ins and outs. So saw how the sausage was made up, down, left, and right. Along the way, had some of my own health challenges, was familiar with the alt health space, and was told mainstream couldn't really do anything to help me. I decided that was the wrong answer, put the time and effort in, and ended up solving a few different health challenges via peptides and other routes. And that just opened Pandora's box for me, because at that point it's like, well, if you can do this, what else can you do? And at that point, obviously pharma wasn't such a good fit for me after kind of opening those doors. So eventually went out into the entrepreneurial space, started a peptide-based skincare business, involved in some other businesses as well, such as Promethean bioregulators. And that is how we got here where we are today. Now with bioregulators, to understand what they are, fundamentally, every organ, every tissue type in your body produces these very small peptides. And what those are signaling molecules. They're telling the tissue how to do the right things. So a silly analogy, instead of sitting on the couch, eating some chips and watching some TV, they're telling that tissue type, that organ, to like, hey, make sure you go to the gym today. Make sure, you eat an apple instead of a bag of chips. So it keeps everything functioning healthily, optimally, and in the best condition. As we age, those naturally drop off. That is essentially one of the hallmarks of aging, is as those drop, tissues get less effective at repairing themselves and maintaining optimal function. Also, just due to environmental exposures, illness, all those other things we deal with every day in the world we live in today, those all degrade that. So bioregulators are generally cross-active across species in all mammals. So where do they come from? There are some bioregulators that are synthetically made just in a lab. The vast majority of them are, to be very frank about it, extracted from the tissue of cattle. And those molecules work the same in a cow as they do in a person, or as they would in a dog, or whatever else. So when you're sourcing these, to Dr. Diane's point, the quality of the source matters quite a bit. So, there are people who take the easy route of, I want stuff from this cow and I don't care about the cow. And, then you can go the other route of, same thing you do with your personal food or your water if you really cared about it. Like, right, no, I'm going to go spend the money on a really nice reverse osmosis water system because I don't want to drink, all the stuff that might be in the drinking water. Same sort of concept. So to make sure you really have the most effective product that isn't going to have all these other things in it that you don't want, you really have to spend the time and effort to find a source of your material that, the exact condition of, how it's handled, how everything's processed, and you have full trust in that source and the processes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Diane?
Yeah, I've got a few things I wanted to share here because people, to understand how they can help. There's 21, right, Nick? We have 21 at this point? 21?
21 what? Sorry.
21 different bioregulators. So you can see my little tiny camera up here. This is how they come. And they come in just capsules, and they're very easy to take. They're very efficient, and they're also they're not super expensive either, but your body is going to feel a big difference with them. So for example, for me, I'm high-powered, high-achieving. I work a lot. I help a lot of people. And the first time I started taking these bioregulators, I was able to take one of my first deep breaths that felt like I had been in a yoga class for 3 hours. And that felt so good to feel calm and at home in my body. And when your body is calm and it's not stressed, it can do what it was designed to do. So bioregulators help multiple things in the body. So the number one reason at this point why so many people have weight gain, energy drain, broken brain, the symptom train, and body pain, among many other things. The symptom train, I say it like that because many people have a lot of symptoms and they go to their doctor and they want a diagnosis and they think, okay, finally, I figured it out. Nobody figured anything out. What they gave you was a classification of a diagnosis that is that is described based on a classification of symptoms. But the real issue is that your cells can't signal with each other, and insulin resistance is at the core root of that. It doesn't just mean, oh, you have type 2 diabetes, take some insulin. There's something that's broken inside the body that we can fix with bioregulators, because your body was making them when you were younger. In your teenage years, you could eat anything and not gain weight for the most part, and you had all the energy in the world, and you can fall asleep when you're in a car or sitting anywhere for that matter. So when we get your body back to homeostasis, everything can work better. People have a lot of liver issues, dysfunction these days. They have fatty liver disease. 1 in 3 children at this point has fatty liver disease. 1 in 3. And they're children. So when you start that early with dis-ease, can you imagine what your future is going to look like and how many medications that you might be on for not treating the root cause? So when we're looking at different bioregulators, the ultimate insulin resistance stack, if you're looking at that, for example, not just type 2 diabetes, but at this point, 90% plus of the population has insulin resistance issues, and you're never going to lose weight if you have insulin resistance, right? You're not going to have healthy hormones. You're not going to have all of the other beautiful benefits from having healthy hormones, like the hair growth, like the beautiful skin, like looking literally like you're 10 years younger, unless we're addressing this at the cellular root. So we have pancreas, pineal, liver, and the thymus gland. And a lot of you who are struggling with brain fog, I mean, this can all be worked through with bioregulators, especially with the levels of dementia that we have today. Brain fog isn't just, oh, I'm working too much, not getting enough rest. This is cell signaling issues, looking at also the central nervous system. And Nick, you can jump in at any time, because this is another one. My dad, we almost lost my dad, and I brought him back to life because the hospital wasn't looking at the root cause. His blood vessels were completely blocked in his heart, in his carotid arteries. And then he also had major issues that many people were seeing who have taken shots, that they have major issues, that their blood vessels are completely clogged. They're not draining. Their body isn't pumping blood throughout the body. And that results in problems. And people are going, why are all of a sudden so many people having strokes and heart disease? So Nick, go ahead and answer that part, because these are the slides we wanted to prepare to show people that with immune system dysfunction in your heart.
Yeah. So, that applies to so many things. Even how many people do you hear about, oh, I went to the doctor, my cholesterol's high, or hey, I might have a plaque of some degree in an artery, and hey, statins, or let's lower cholesterol, this and that. But whether it's that or other recent inflammatory things that have caused serious issues with people's vascular systems, what's actually driving all of that is inflammation. Because in healthy blood vessels, one of the things that's going on is they're actively producing nitric oxide, NO. And that signals healthy function, repair, everything they're supposed to be doing. As inflammation ramps up, the nitric oxide signaling gets disrupted, it drops off, and it's kind of suddenly like not changing the oil in your car. You can get away with it for a little while, depending on the car, maybe a long while. But the longer you go, the more gunk is building up, the more wear and tear, until something is going to break. So even if you have other issues with your car, you haven't rotated your tires in a while, you get a leaky radiator, at some point you have to deal with the core issues. If the engine doesn't run, you're not worried about your tires, you're not worried about your radiator. So the reality is, the takeaway from that is that for any of us to be walking around having a conversation, the core of that all depends on our vasculature, on our blood vessels throughout the entire body. If they cannot function well, everything else is going to start to suffer. And you can get some really nasty cascades, because if you start to get vascular system dysfunction for whatever reason, it can come from a wide array of places. The cells that make the endothelium, which is essentially the cells that make up the lining of the blood vessels, they will start to produce inflammatory cytokines and other molecules. And now those flow all around the body, just like your blood will, and it becomes a feedback loop. So the vascular system gets inflamed, it gives off inflammatory signals, and now that gets passed to other parts of the body, whether it's the brain, the heart, the kidney, the lungs, the gut. So now you're just spreading the inflammation around everywhere. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of conditions, that's why it can almost sound, silly to some people at first. Like Dr. Diane in our first conversation, at first people can be like, well, why is part of the answer to everything addressing your blood vessels, your vasculature system? Well, the answer is that's why. Because if you can't have efficient blood flow, whether it's hair, whether it's heart function, whether it's kidney, liver, lungs, skin, whatever it is, if you can't have efficient blood flow and if you don't address potential inflammation in your vascular system, which is just going to keep spreading that inflammation, you're struggling against the tide. It's like bailing a boat out without plugging the hole in the bottom.
Mm-hmm. And we
Okay.
have hormonal issues happening too. So if we're looking at hormone optimization, can you guys see that?
It's just still coming up, still loading.
Yeah, I'll go to another one. I wanted to talk about hormones too, and going back to hair loss, because when you're looking at inflammation, and this is the best analogy that I have been able to give to people where they get it. Mainstream medicine looks at, okay, you have inflammation, let's take an anti-inflammatory. Maybe that will put out some fires, but who's asking the question, who's starting the fires? Who are the arsonists? And the arsonists are the things we talked about today. And we can't change everything in our environment. We can't say, stop spraying lines in the sky. You know, we don't have control over that. What we do have control over is what we do about how our body responds to it. So many people are struggling with body pain. They need surgeries. They can't walk. And they know they should be exercising and moving more. But they, like to Nick's point, you have cell signalers that are these regulators that say, go to the gym, eat healthier. But you can't, people say, oh, I don't have enough motivation. I don't have enough discipline. I buy the chips and I eat them all. Well, this is what will actually slow that down so that your body goes back to craving what it actually needs. And then your hormones can start being produced effectively. And we're addressing the arsonists on the inside of the body. We're also restoring the organ function that has been lost from all of the arsonists that have been just shooting at all of these organs and tissues that can't activate and function as well. So when you address these things, your hair can start to grow back, your hormones will start to be produced and be used at the right levels. And then you can think clearly again. So it's not just, let's take something to stop the inflammation feeling. It's actually to stop the arsonists so they're not doing damage to the body, and then we're restoring the damage. So and contrary to a lot of prescriptions, things people will take that are loaded with poisons, and that does nothing to resolve the root of the issue in your tissue, which is exactly what bioregulators do in capsule form. So Nick, I would love for you to speak, just if somebody were to get started, you know, in some of these bioregulators, because we've been speaking kind of general, you're so good at giving people advice on where to get started so that they can get their hair back, their hormones, their energy, their sleep, and they can start to feel themselves again, you know, one day at a time.
Yeah. One thing I'll just jump ahead and add to that is one of the realities of health, wellness, the world we live in is, you know, just to be brutally honest about it, a lot of the mainstream options, approaches, if you really boil them down, are primarily Band-Aids. Up, down, left, or right, good or bad, without getting to judgment. Fundamentally, most of them are Band-Aids. So a lot of times, I know you've seen this, Dr. Diane, Nick V, I'm sure you run into this, is just the constant debate of, well, all the mainstream stuff is bad and all the alternative approaches are good, or vice versa. And the reality is we all live in the real world. So, you know, hair loss is a great example. Hey, holy cow, I just started losing my hair really quickly. Maybe I listened to Dr. Diane talking about this, or Nick V, or somebody else. And the reality is those things do take time. They don't happen overnight. But hey, we live in the real world. I'm not willing to sit here and just lose all my hair, right, in the interim, or wait for it to slow down. So the reality is there usually is a middle ground. One of the important things to understand with regard to hair loss, at least with two common compounds, and this is my personal opinion on this, is generally speaking, I don't think anybody should ever go near finasteride. Finasteride is a direct hormone blocker, and it's not just about hair. When you block, DHT is involved for both men and women in countless numbers of biological actions in your body. Your hormone system is essentially the signaling control center for all your biological functions. So there's no get out of jail free card. If you start getting involved in hormone blockers, there are going to be issues. It's just a matter of how soon, how quick, and what form they take. If somebody wants to take a middle ground, and I've worked with people and they've asked me this because, like, hey, I'm not willing to wait. I have to do something right now. The honest answer, the real world answer is, minoxidil is the least of the, not great choices. You can use it in many cases and come off it very slowly if you do it with the right stacks and not lose what you manage to keep. But it's never going to be a long-term tool. It does need to be understood essentially as a Band-Aid, as a stopgap while you address all these underlying systems. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. But with regard to bioregulators, to also understand one difference about them, because I'm sure a lot of your audience has heard peptides before, usually associated with injection and things like that. Bioregulators work orally because of their very, very small size. Don't worry about if you don't understand the exact technical measurement here. But for example, BPC 157, which most people have heard of, that's something like a 15 kilodalton peptide. That's how big it is. You get down to most bioregulators, and they're only 3 or 4 amino acids. So what that means is when you take them and they go into your stomach, your body actually has natural transport mechanisms, little pieces of biological machinery that are actually made to pick up amino acid chains of that size and take them directly into your bloodstream out of your stomach. That way they're not getting broken down by stomach acid, by digestion. Whereas most of the mainstream, we'll say, therapeutic peptides that people are familiar with that you would inject, those are too big to use that pathway. So they're almost always going to get broken down, digested by the stomach acid, by the enzymes. That's why you can take these orally. Now, once they're in your body, the other difference is most peptides people are familiar with for injection, they're essentially working through signaling on the outside of the cell. So like a lock and a key. I'm going to go fit in this little receptor on a cell and tell it to go do something. The way most bioregulators work is that they are so small, the vast majority of them can easily be transported into the cell. And fundamentally, what they're doing in most cases is actually epigenetic signaling. So you have your core DNA, right? The blueprint of life. And that gets translated to all the things your body does, enzymes you make, what cells do, everything. That process, that translation process, is what everybody's heard of, even if they don't realize it. And it's called epigenetics. How are we translating the information from the DNA to how our body actually uses it? So what bioregulators are effectively doing is going inside the cell, and they're modulating the epigenetics, because the easiest way to explain it is cells can generally operate in 2 states. Hey, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm doing my job. I'm going to the gym, I'm eating well, getting up early, getting it done. Or they can operate in the opposite state of, you know what, I'm just overwhelmed, I'm overstressed, so I'm just going to sit on the couch, eat some ice cream, watch some TV, I'm too tired to go to the gym. So think of bioregulators, as silly as this may sound, as the friend showing up, or your partner or your spouse, your husband, your wife, when you get home from work, saying, hey, I know you're tired, but you need to go to the gym for a little bit. So you listen to them, and then in a few days, you're like, hey, I'm feeling better, so now I can just go on my own. So with bioregulators, they generally aren't things you're just going to run forever. You would generally cycle them, run them for 1 month, 2 months, and take a break. Maybe you only run them twice a year, 3 times a year. Because coming back to that analogy, as silly as it is, it really captures what's happening. Is they're essentially like, hey, get back in the habit of getting home from work, taking a moment to rest if you need it, and then going to the gym, because then you're still going to feel good. Then you can do the job you're supposed to do. So circling all the way back, and I apologize for the sidebar there. When you get into things like hair loss, you know, two key pieces are endocrine signaling and blood vessel, blood flow integrity. So, you can start from several different places, and it depends on men and women, right? So for both men and women, you'd want to focus on endocrine and, the cardiovascular system, blood vessel. You would also want to look at liver because, that almost sounds counterintuitive, like my liver, my hair. Well, if your blood is not effectively cleaned by your liver and consistently carrying around toxins, whether it's endocrine disruptors, heavy metals, whatever else, just like the inflammatory signaling, it's kind of like spreading pollution all over the city instead of the garbage man or the sewers working properly. And then when you get into men, there's a set of bioregulators, one for testes and one for prostate. So, whether you're 35, 45, 55, in the world we live in today, I'm sure your audience, Nick V, knows this very well. Whether it's shampoos, skin creams, stuff in the water, we're just surrounded with stuff that disrupt our hormones, their natural function. And for men, the poor signaling directly tied to the brain to produce hormones that are needed for all the functions our body does. You essentially have two command centers. You have the brain, and then you have the male reproductive organs, which is the prostate and the testes. And most people think prostate, and they don't really think much about it. Oh, maybe a prostate exam when I'm older. But the prostate and the testes actually work together for male hormonal signaling. So whether it's for general health and wellness, whether it's for improving overall hormonal health to support hair state, one of the first places most guys probably want to go, most especially if you're over age 40, is testes, prostate, and blood vessel. And the really interesting thing in men is usually bioregulators, they're subtle. You're not going to take it and feel like, oh my God, I just drank 5 coffees and I'm ready to go. That's not how they work because they're working at the epigenetic level. But the really interesting thing is most guys, we'll say 40 and over, and I'm going to be a little bit clinical here, purely clinical, is that most guys over 40, the pure unfiltered truth is that morning arousal that, you had to be careful to roll over when you're 18, when you wake up first thing in the morning. It's not occurring so often when you're 40, when you're 45, and as you get older. And when you were 18, when you were 25, you never had to get up in the middle of the night to pee. Well, suddenly you're 40, 45, and you're like, what? I got to get up in the middle of the night to pee. So part of this comes back to proper hormonal signaling in those two sets of tissues, the testes and the prostate. So most guys who especially take those two together and combined with blood vessel, usually within a week, some guys can take it to 2 weeks. It's really interesting because most guys will see a day and night effect. Whereas like, holy cow, I haven't had to be careful to roll over when I wake up and I don't know how long. And suddenly I don't have to get up to pee in the middle of the night. Like, holy cow, I actually slept through the night, which sounds silly, but as we all know, circadian rhythm, how important that is. Having your sleep disrupted in the middle of the night, even if just to pee, does have an impact on how you feel the next day.
Cool. So you're saying that the bioregulators basically, they regulate your whole body. It's not just the hair.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And that's where mainstream approaches to hair loss, in my opinion, are fundamentally go off the rails because, we're just going to look at your hair. And if all we're doing is a hair transplant, I'll give them that, okay, because we're just transplanting follicles. But beyond that, as Dr. Diane said, the best way to understand hair is it's actually a signaling mechanism of your overall health. And most people recognize this without even thinking about it, right? If you're walking down the street and you see two different women you find attractive, and one has beautiful, glowing, thick hair, and the other's hair is a little wispy, flat, so on and so forth. Even if it's not intentional, you're going to notice it at a subconscious level. And the same goes for guys. You have a woman walking down the street, she sees two different guys she finds attractive. One has, a thick, full, great head of hair, however they have it styled. And, the other, it's a little wispy on top, it's a little thin. It's not just a subjective beauty thing. If you really dig, if you want to go real deep and you go into evolutionary biology, it's actually a signaling mechanism that we all have to each other that acts as an indicator of our overall health that everyone around us can see.
Absolutely, yeah. Guys, we are running slightly out of time, but Nick, that was amazing that you explained all of that. Thank you very much. Dr. Diane Kazer, is there anything that you want to say, that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick is very good at obviously describing the science behind all of this, but the outcome for all of you is that we're all looking for the same things. We're all looking to feel like we did maybe when we were a teenager, but some people were born with illness and some people as a teenager didn't feel that well. So we're looking to reset your body back to 100%. That's what bioregulators do. And peptides that Nick spoke of, like BPC, TB500, GHKC, a lot of these, they will bring your body beyond that. And the patients that I've worked with, their bodies, and for so many of us, this is a collective issue, especially in the United States. So many people are so deficient in nutrients and so toxic and so gastrointestinally imbalanced, where they're filled with the things that are making them sick, like the mold and the candida, that if we get them started sometimes with injections or the larger peptides that we spoke about in previous shows, Nick, their body might be so hypervigilant and sensitive that they react in a way that doesn't feel good. So I like to combine or even start with, so if you're looking for a starting point with peptides, bioregulators is a great place to start because they're more gentle. They start to slowly activate and reawaken the system again, so that when you do try maybe injections like at home, and a lot of people are talking about, Ozempic and Wegovy and Mounjaro for weight loss, those are things that you can do on your own at home with injections, and really doing GLPs on your own and doing it at a fraction of the price. But I would say that just like Nick said, hair growth is not accomplished in a vacuum. We can't just treat the hair loss. We've got to look at the whole body systemically. You don't just lose weight, with an injection that's a GLP. We have a $2 billion lawsuit now on our hands with Ozempic and Wegovy, and because the doctors are not treating the whole body. So imagine that and apply that to every other principle that you guys are experiencing when you go to the doctor. What we're trying to help you guys here is restore your entire tree. There is no shortcuts. But I will say with bioregulators, that is the shortcut. It is the bridge so that your body can start to activate its own normal healing mechanisms again. Without this, I'm afraid that cleansing and parasite killing and all of these things, yes, it works, but it works for a short time. I've been teaching cleansing and parasite killing for 17 years. And the reason I brought on peptides and bioregulators is because we need them. I do not think that we can get by without them because of all of the EMFs and the radiation and the toxins and the parasites and the stress that's around us. This is the way that we need to bring our body back to full restoration slowly but surely. So I think this is a solution for everybody, not just for hair loss, not just for hormone health. And we put the link to below. I know, Nick, we got your discount for your audience as well.
Absolutely. I'll be leaving the link below in the description. So have a look at the bioregulators. And just for the sake of YouTube, we're not, health advisors. Do your own research, but please click the link below and have a look. Dr. Diane, thank you very much for sharing everything with us today. And also, Nick Andrews, thank you so much. Is there anything, Nick, that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
I think it was a great honor to have a chance to speak with you and your audience. You guys are an awesome crowd, very forward thinking, and it's just great to see that growing amongst people, taking the effort to go find their own answers. So, it's a pleasure to get to be a part of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And hopefully we'll speak again very soon. You take care. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Bye.